I just want to make sure that I understand. The activity centers are really all parking lots right now. Is that's all of the village centers?
Not all of them.
And which of the activity centers that are slated to be developed are not parking lots?
You want to go through them? I mean,
Sure, happy to go through them. So the village centers, like you're familiar with, I mean, some definitely include large parking lots. Others include existing buildings. We mentioned downtown Columbia, which is currently in the process of redevelopment.
That's not an activity center, is it?
Downtown Columbia is an activity center.
Okay, I thought it was called Downtown Columbia.
It's an activity center type. So we have, on the activity center map, we have a series of activity center types. So one of those would be downtown
Could we
Columbia.
go back to the activity center map, just so we could take a
Yeah,
look at
we
it?
can
That would be
share it.
great.
Yeah. Can walk through it. So I'll just, yeah, Kate's got it up. So downtown Columbia is our first activity center there in the dark blue. So as you know, that's in the process of redevelopment. Gateway is in that lime green color, and that does include existing buildings and parking lots. Our village centers, as I mentioned.
So that's 8 village centers that I'm looking at, right?
Should
The
be
circles, the light
9.
blue, the sort of greenish blue circles?
I believe it's 9.
9? Okay, 9. Those are all parking lots. And then
And then remaining in
and
Columbia.
then Gateway.
Yeah.
That's considered but that isn't really counting. Okay, but that's a lot of parking lots. That's a lot of parking lots. And then.
well, most of them are older commercial centers that have a vast sea of parking around them. So it's all impervious, so it provides an opportune area for redevelopment.
And then the 3 little places in the Crossroads, Highland,
So those
That's-
are not activity centers.
those are not activity centers.
So continuing in Columbia, we have the Snowden-Dobbin Activity Center, which is just adjacent to Gateway. There's kind of a northern portion and a southern portion to that. So you'll see the industrial mixed-use area in the south and the mixed-use activity center in light blue in the north, just directly next to Gateway. And then going further north, we have our Route 40 activity centers. So there's 3 areas along Route 40. Along Route 100, we have 2 shopping centers identified as the Longgate and Meadow Ridge.
All right, so let's slow down.
Sure.
Let's take a look at that. All right? So you have Longgate as an activity center. What does that's a big parking lot. Okay, what does that mean? Or does that mean that the parking lot would be up for redevelopment for apartments? Is that the idea? I'm trying to,
Yeah.
it looks like the idea is the
Yeah.
activity centers are redevelopment of parking lots. I just want to understand that.
It's a lot of the activity centers, with the exception of those that have already redeveloped, right, such as Wild Lake, downtown Columbia, which already has a plan. So in this case of Meadow Ridge and Longgate, those are places that are primarily either have older commercial centers and a sea of parking lot around it. And this activity center says, the activity center designation says, this is a targeted area for redevelopment, right? And redevelopment would involve a mix of uses, which could include housing, commercial, office space, and open space.
Well, I thought the whole idea of the activity center and the whole idea of this general plan is to bring in more units. So why would there be an activity center designation if there weren't apartments being put in the parking lots?
Yeah, I said it would be a mix of uses to
Okay.
include residential, but it wouldn't only be residential. The idea is that it'll be a mix of uses to also include commercial and other open space opportunities.
Okay, so Longgate would be apartments, and Meadow Ridge, is that what you just said, Meadow Ridge?
Meadow Ridge, yes.
The area around the Meadow Ridge gym, or where would that be?
It's a shopping center, so right off Route 100.
Is there where Cupcakes and Co. is?
Okay,
Oh, where like Countryside Vet
It's
is?
at yeah, I think it's at 100 and 103 specifically.
and that's a parking lot. That's the thought, is that parking lot would be turned into apartments.
Could you
Well,
go through the
mix of
4
uses.
things that would be
Mix of
included
uses.
in
Could
the
I-
activity center?
Excuse me, can I ask my question without being interrupted?
Oh, sure. You
Okay.
keep saying apartments, and Ms. Kendall mentioned additional things, and I want to make sure I capture them so we know what we're talking about when it comes to activity
Okay,
centers.
we'll get there.
Okay, thank you so much,
All
Ms.
right.
Young.
Okay. So, well, because the intensity that you keep mentioning, the extra intensity that will, or density that will come to help meet this demand are coming from the activity centers. So I'm assuming that that means that each of these activity centers would have to have well more than 100, if not well more than 200 units, which would have to be apartments, in order to meet these numbers. Is that the idea?
I would just point out, and I'm looking at the character area, the mixed-use activity center description, and we talk about a mix of uses, including missing middle home choices, flex uses to support future market demands, structured parking, and then an overall mix of residential and non-residential, as Ms. Kendall pointed out. But it's not necessarily, there is nothing in here that says they're going to be apartments. This is the idea is that it would be a mix of housing opportunities, including missing middle. There are some policies directed towards affordable housing within these as well, and meeting those targets.
And is any of that directed toward home ownership opportunities, or is all of this rental?
It could
Is this
be.
part of the, what is it? I think it was 16,000 rental units around that in the overall plan. Is all of this rental?
HOCO by design is not dictating, what that ownership scheme would look like, as we kind of talked about the last time, is that's mainly market-driven, and we don't regulate for whether something is going to be a rental or an ownership, and something, it could flip, you could have apartments that turn into condos. Those things can be interchangeable. Right now, we have a apartment complex in downtown Columbia that's renting out 2 floors as a hotel while they lease up, so.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand all these activity centers. So I'd like to go back to the map. We've got Meadow Ridge, we've got Longgate Shopping Center, we have 9 village centers, and what else?
So, as I mentioned, we've got the 3 along Route 40.
Okay, so the 3 along Route 40, what are those 3?
So that is Enchanted Woods,
Forest.
Chatham, Enchanted Forest, sorry, Chatham, and the area around.
Normandy.
Yeah, Normandy, thank you.
Enchanted Forest, Normandy, and what was the third one?
Chatham.
This map is not part of the 700 pages. This is a slide, the map that we're looking at right now. We just didn't think of including it. This is just a slide that we have developed for presentations, so.
You can access this as a printable from the website as well. We create it as a additional supplement.
We could certainly we can put it in there. The council we can put it in there in the council draft. The council can put it in there if you think that's important.
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah.
'cause
But the
we do
flume
have,
still-
like, this
There was
and
no
all these.
intentional
It's a lot.
reason. I think just we were using it more for, purposes of education, and
But
it
the
certainly
flume's-
could make its way in there.
The flume still shows, like, for instance, on Route 40 corridor, the 3 mixed-use activity centers, like, you can see where those are, and if you know Route 40, like,
Yeah, and they're primarily
they're property-specific on the
the
flume.
areas that are zoned the TNC today
Right.
that can do a mix already of residential.
Right, not everybody has access or wants to go to the website to see this. That's why I'm trying to tease this information out in this public hearing, so that people will understand where these activity centers right now are being located. So this isn't really just for me. This is also for members of the public who might want to know where their parking lots are going to be developed, okay? So right now, we've got Longgate, Meadow Ridge, we have Normandy, Chatham, Enchanted Forest, the 9 village centers, and what did I miss?
So there's one last section, which is along our Route 1 corridor.
And what is the Route 1 corridor? I mean, where are the activity centers located on the Route 1 corridor?
Sure, so you can see there's one in our North Laurel area, and we get into a little bit more detail as to the locations of each of these in the Route 1 plan. But we have North Laurel area near the MARC station, an Annapolis Junction Transit Activity Center.
That's already isn't that already being developed?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Our Dorsey MARC station area, so there's a district around there. And then we have another activity center called our South Elkridge District.
And where is the one in South Elkridge located?
So the South Elkridge one, I would say, is along Route 100. It's near the Elkridge Library location.
I also just want to point out that in the Route 1 plan, there are also maps of each of those activity centers.
In the Elkridge Library, is the activity center planned for the parking lot of the library? I'm just trying to think where, that's such a, seems like a
just
developed
opposite Route
area
1 from the Elkridge Library.
on the opposite side. And what is located there now?
It's a mix of.
Yeah, if we get to the Route 1 maps on the South Elkridge.
Okay.
It's on one of the slides, is that place that's going to be in
That's the doors. Yeah, so this is the map of the South Elkridge Activity Center, which shows our adjustments to industrial mixed use from mixed use activity center on the flume. But these are the maps you'll find in the Route 1 plan as well. So you'll see the Harwood Park neighborhood is to the east of the South Elkridge Activity Center there, and the Elkridge Library is to the west of Route 1.
So the light brown, I'll let you ask these questions because you're more familiar with Route 1 than I am.
The asterisk is the library, right?
Yes.
The Elms at Elkridge is what the zoning board approved in the old dump site.
Oh,
It was called the Roberts property when the zoning board approved it.
right.
A majority of the zoning.
That's the
Not
red
these
or
two
the,
members of the zoning board.
that's the red or the pink?
That's the pink.
Pink.
It says the Elms at Elkridge, you can see.
Oh, okay.
But
Oh, my God, you have good
immediately across
eyes.
from the street was a site that the community wanted as a high school, but was told we couldn't do it because it's such an important distribution site. Those are big trucks that come in and out of there. This is the fundamental problem with treating Route 1 like it's some kind of mixed-use walkable community. It's absolutely not. It's super dangerous. It's super dangerous. I don't know why we keep pretending like you can put high-density child community activities immediately across the street from a distribution center and pretend like that's design. I thought you were saying we concede defeat here and we're just going to keep, having trucks, or we're going to have a plan and make them go this way. That's all our office hears is these trucks are going around because there's yet another accident on Route 1. So now they're cutting through my neighborhood. Now they're driving down my Harwood Park or sneaking around the back on Hanover Road. But I thought when you presented this that you were saying, we're walking away from this because it doesn't work. And we know this from 10 or 20 years of overdeveloping Route 1 or changing those industrial uses to residential. But now you're saying this is one of three, only three on 11 miles of Route 1 activity center where we're going to put in, what are the four things, Ms. Rigby?
I'd have to go back to my activity, but there was open space, office, commercial, and residential?
Could be a mix of uses. They have not yet fully been prescribed, but they're envisioned to be places that could offer opportunities for residential development, for commercial development. That would include office or retail, which also there's a great need we've heard in the Route 1 corridor for more retail development. And then also they could have open spaces, which could be support more community gathering spaces, which again was also a need that we heard from the Route 1 community when we did all of the engagement.
We also.
So these are areas targeted, there are 3 areas targeted in the Route 1 corridor for these future mixed-use development.
Ms. Welch, do you mind if I ask a clarifying?
I'm done again. I'm walking away.
When you say need, is that from market demand for retail or that there's residents who desire there to be functional retail?
Mostly the latter.
Okay.
And the Route 1
Because I was going to say,
plan
we've struggled to fill these
gets into
retail
that in more
spaces.
detail, but it's that neighborhood serving commercial that the residents have been asking for that we haven't realized through our CAC zoning, which is up and down the entire corridor. And this is trying to move away from this corridor wide,
All
kind of
12 miles.
piecemeal, redevelopment scheme to something that's more targeted and focused, where we can try to achieve some of this neighborhood serving commercial along with the residential in specific targeted locations.
So essentially, the residents have said we would like more functional retail, and this is an attempt to create an area in which retail would choose to go to meet that resident desire.
Or which we can achieve that for them, correct.
Right, okay.
And then, again, we'll get into it, I'm sure staff will get into it more when we get into the Route 1 chapters, like how we identify these specific areas. But, when you look at this, you see, there were certain areas that had already started to see some of those amenities that we tried to use as catalysts to then encourage more amenitized space around that. So like you have the library, now you're going to have the Elms at Elkridge, which is going to have some pedestrian connectivity along Route 1, and so forth. So that's just an example here, but we tried to look at, what was happening around these areas and identifying them, and then also taking into consideration where you have, underutilized land that, maybe has non-conforming uses, is blighted, that we get complaints about, and trying to see some redevelopment opportunity there.
Okay, because I was definitely confused about the.
And I feel like Sarah wants
the
to jump
demand
in with some
piece.
clarification.
I just wanted to add that, as we discussed, there's several different types of activity centers. So as Mary mentioned, that mix of uses, one thing that's highlighted for Route 1 and discussed in the Route 1 plan is the addition of light industrial uses to these activity centers. So not only, might you see retail, office, and residential uses, you might see indoor industrial uses as well.
All right, well, let's get to Mr. Youngman, so then we can get on to fiscal analysis.
I can't reconcile this, the residents want more retail, but we can't fill retail. And we have a blight of empty retail. We just, I know it's saying over the next 20 years, that's not going to change. It's not really from a general plan standpoint, but if it was really in demand, it would be there and be in business, wouldn't it?
No, they were saying that residents said, we want this.
His question was directed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but,
Hold on. Residents say they want it,
Right.
but,
But right now,
so the problem is the businesses don't want to go there despite this demand, or is it too expensive? Or like, what's preventing us from filling that retail space? Is that an EDA question?
I could just, what is preventing it? We hear from the development community that in the locations where it's being required, right, through the CAC zoning, that they are kind of like piecemeal throughout the corridor. And so just trying to demand commercial in, all these disparate locations hasn't been, there hasn't been the market for that. But the hope is that, by trying to focus them in a node, right, where there is, like we said, we're going to have the Elms at Elkridge and you have the Harwood Park community, then you would have additional residential through redevelopment and creating this sense of place. And that's a big component that we get into in the Route 1 master plan, which is about creating a sense of place in these areas, right? And so the hope is that some of that will drive the commercial demand to meet the, both the existing residents and then the new residents that will be located there. There's one more thing I was going to add, and then it escaped me.
Do it all the time.
It'll come back.
Maybe it'll come back. But back to this sort of oddity of Route 1, right? 20 years ago, we made this mistake. We said, we are now going to move a bunch of residential, put a bunch of residences intermixed throughout this corridor. But I think the plan at that point was, hey, we can just make Route 1 this sort of mixed-use residential, looks like downtown Columbia. We don't need those ugly warehouses anymore, but we do. And we've now figured that out. So we have this dilemma that we've moved 10,000 people up and down Route 1 in a community, I don't know what they were told when they bought there, if they were told the whole thing's going to look like Howard Square or Blue Stream or something someday, or if they're going to be living across the street from warehouses. But, I mean, you talk about creating 59,000 jobs, they're not going to be created if Route 1 becomes basically downtown Columbia. You know, retail, small office, and residential. So what do we do? You know, do you just keep cramming more more residential into Route 1, which creates sort of more, it's like the same thing with the farmers, right? Like I moved out here to be next to a farm. Well, nobody wants to be next to a warehouse. I moved out to the west, and now the farms are on my last nerve. I moved to Route 1, now I don't want to be around trucks. Like, what do we do? How's that reflected in this?
Well, I'll start. We were very deliberate and focused on minimizing loss of industrial lands. We work very closely with EDA on the flume portion along the Route 1 corridor. So one of the foremost goals in addressing the corridor was minimal loss of industrial land, and more specifically, M2 land, no net loss of M2 land, right? So maybe some of the lighter industrial could be rezoned into a mixed-use, industrial mixed-use activity center to still allow for that light industrial, right? So that's one piece of it. I don't know that we're necessarily recommending more residential on the corridor, and this does not speak to anything even remotely akin to downtown Columbia. These are much smaller focused activity centers. It's more, kind of collapsing the residential in specific areas rather than having it spread throughout the corridor.
Okay, because the fact that it's spread throughout the corridor, I think, is what might be causing this sort of dilemma.
Right.
Okay, that's,
Yeah, I was just.
I don't know, we got
I
to
know
an
you had a lot
answer,
of
but I
things in
just
your
wanted
question,
to
so.
talk about it.
Yeah, I was just going to also add, the Route 1 corridor plan, which again, we'll get into when we get to that work session. There are a good number of policies and recommendations for how to improve transportation, and there are specific recommendations for transportation improvements even within each activity center. So recognizing, of course, that truck traffic is a concern and an issue, so how do we sort of balance the two or ensure that the two can coexist?
Yeah, because that's important. I mean, again, none of us were here when these decisions were made. Well, Jeff might have been here. I don't know. I don't know how. But I mean, we've now created this sort of inherent conflict. And anybody that moves to Route 1 or that area can't be advocating, I don't want to live near trucks, because we can't survive unless we have those types of businesses along that corridor. So I just want to make sure we're not going to exasperate that problem by moving 10,000 more people into Route 1 that aren't going to want to be near trucks. So.
I was wondering if you could walk through go back to the transit or the activity centers with the teal dots and the multiple circles slide. And also just for anybody who is watching who has concerns about Route 1 and the future plan, I'd recommend checking page 14. It's where you can see that that these activity centers have been located near housing to provide that sense of placemaking to prevent exactly the situation that Mr. Yeoman's talking about.
Next to some housing. But
Yeah.
we're concentrating it now, rather than spreading it out where the housing has been built.
No, it's near, I mean, I would say except with Savage, but the rest of it has a nexus to these brown blocks, which are the neighborhoods. So, for example, when you look at the Elms one we just looked at, that's why it's all on the same, this is all on the same side, so it's these people can access this. And then this area right here, you could do more to slow down traffic and do traffic calming to make that community node safer. Rather than the previous
walking away,
approach
yeah.
of the entire 12 miles. So now you don't have to agree, it's just.
I'm just going to say,
yeah.
right, we obviously do not agree. Okay.
No, I'm stating what is. And trying to give information to people, so if they want to see it, they can read it. With these activity centers, what year was stormwater regulations introduced to the county? I,
I believe it was 2010.
the first stormwater regulations? God, that's late. Okay.
Well, no, that was environmental site design. I mean,
Oh, that was ESD.
there's a history of stormwater
Yeah.
management that goes back to, I think it's the 80s, is the first stormwater management.
Definitely
And
not,
then
not
there's-
earlier than the 80s.
Change
We
in,
know that?
When would you say there was sufficient stormwater? I mean, my home was Columbia, a lot of Columbia was built without stormwater management. But,
I thought it was in 2010 when the requirements for the environmental concept plans and all the MDE regulations came
okay,
into
so there was like
place.
some
Yeah.
runoff management, but you wouldn't say
Right,
it was
where all
holistic.
the MDE regulations came into place, that we have environmental concept plans, that we do ESD, environmental site design, and all those more current practices.
Okay, could you walk me through which of these, and you don't have to tell me the year they were developed, but if you can just say before 2010 or after 2010 for the activity centers, that would be helpful for me to know which would then, through redevelopment, because I assume through redevelopment, they would be required to comply with all modern regulations. So they
Correct.
would be required to comply with enhanced stormwater regulations.
Is it safe to say that most predate the stormwater management regulations?
Correct. I mean, the only two that come to mind that would follow 2010 would be Wild Lake or downtown Columbia.
Okay. So for the rest, as they redevelop, we'll be achieving more stormwater management for more acre feet of water.
Correct.
Great.
Generally speaking, yes.
All right. Are there any final questions for growth conservation? Ms. Walsh?
This one was in both documents, one of my can't reconcile type issues. And I'm trying to find your bar. It's on page 32 of the big document. Sorry. And it shows the bars that between the P, S, E, and T. And my concern is that we say places like, for example, historic communities, which is my old Ellicott City, my historic Elk Ridge, my Lawyers Hill, other communities have places. There are probably other places that should be on that list. But even historic community, which to me should be totally off limits, is in areas to preserve and areas to strengthen. And to me, that's just a loophole. I decide it's going to be an area to strengthen, so I'm going to do whatever I want in this place, notwithstanding that it's historic community and we say, this is where we're going to preserve. How do we resolve that fluidity, and how do you look at a piece of property and say, this area, this neighborhood, that building is going to look like this in 100 years versus, it's on this side of the S instead of that side of the P?
So specific to historic communities, I think that what we pretty much say in the plan is that we recognize that there are various elements and features in a historic community that needs to be preserved, because that's just really important to the character of the county. When we get into the strengthen piece, that really focuses more on kind of revitalization. How do we continue to spruce up and improve the physical appearance of our historic communities? Not looking to change them or transform, just strengthen them and revitalize them. So there will still need to be some level of investment made to continue to support and improve these historic buildings. So that's why, so we didn't want people to think if it's an area to preserve, that it's just going to be kind of left in preservation, the way that some properties, say out in the rural west, might be preserved, the way an environmental resource might be preserved, or agricultural land might be preserved. Historic community, trying to preserve the historic character, but strengthening will need to occur and maintenance will need to occur because historic buildings require, as you know, maintenance and improvement.
I mean, I hope that's what it means, but I would not have thought, I think that all of those verbs, maintenance, repair, sprucing up, that would go under preserve to me. When it's in strengthen, I think this is a loophole that I can say, I'm going to build this thing that's totally out of place and changes this whole, streetscape.
Yeah, and I hope when we get to quality by design, I think that's where we have a grander discussion on historic preservation and historic character.
Okay. I'm, again, I just, can't reconcile that one either.
All right.
I have a number of questions
Okay.
that I really would like to go through. We do
Sure. Well,
this
why don't you pick your top two, and then
once every
we're also
11
encouraged.
years, and I think we should
Yes. So I'm just trying to finish my sentence here. We have requested that council members, similar to budget, if you have additional questions, to send them in advance. So that way we can really prioritize our time and really use them for the items that we want to surface for the public.
We
So,
didn't have this presentation until last night.
Yeah, and I do think that once every 11 years that we have an opportunity to daylight this process to the public and to ask these questions, if it takes more than the allotted moments that you have decided are all we are allotted, that we can continue the questions.
If we do that, we're going to need another session, though. Because
And I
we're not
think we
going to
might
spend
need-
10 minutes on fiscal.
No, we're not.
Right,
And I
thank you,
think
Mr.
that that
Youngman.
was too much to put into this one session. Yes.
well, I would ask that when I send out documents requesting feedback, that it is shared so we can incorporate it. We're really trying to
I have
make
given
it-
you my feedback, so.
And I especially appreciate constructive feedback that can be accomplished. So, again, with this, I'm simply asking you to prioritize the questions that you have, so that way we can really get to the most important things. And while we may not have had the presentation, I'm not formulating my questions from the presentation. I'm formulating mine from the general plan, which we've had which is developed over the last 3 years. So I fully understand that everybody does their work differently, but perhaps figuring out the alignment of the presentations, if that's what members want to work off of instead of the plan, it might be helpful to get those, would you say, a week in advance?
Yes.
A week in advance for the next time. So that way we can be sure that members will have had the opportunity to read through the materials prior to the presentations. Go ahead, Ms. Young.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Once every 11 years, we get to ask these questions. So I am back to the activity center because I have, I guess, 5 of those in my councilmanic district. So I'm very focused on what it is that the plans could be for these activity centers. And I'd like to know how, so you talked about in the plan about these different aspects of the activity centers, the ways in which they would be built out, I guess, or the ideas behind the build-out. And among other things, mentioned that the activity centers could enhance stormwater management, increase open space, and that they could, parcels that are redevelopment, that there was also the possibility for, or that it would also allow for more natural, larger natural environment. And I'm just trying to think about the one village center I know that has been redeveloped. And while I do think they've improved the stormwater situation there with their permeable pavers, I am not sure that any of those other things have actually taken place, because even though they have the permeable pavers, they also have a lot more concrete because of the way in which it was built. And there are really no trees and no green space to speak of. And I'm just trying to think, how does this actually happen in an activity center?
I think it's a short answer, which is that would all have to be achieved through the zoning. So we're setting a vision, we're identifying the principles that we want to see.
That's a good answer, and I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, and this is really to provide as much concrete direction as we can, so that when you have to make those tough zoning decisions, that you have the guidance in the general plan.
Okay,
That this
so
is what we said we wanted to see there.
if you're saying it then in the general plan, then
You would have
we
to-
would look at it and try and put it into the zoning code. I appreciate that, because Ms. Walsh and I were talking about this yesterday afternoon, about what, in this general plan, do we take away in the long run to what's the next step? And I know the next step is comprehensive rezoning, et cetera, but how do we take what you have given us and then, for example, say, all right, if you're going to build an activity center here, these are the things that you have to do in accordance with the general plan. So I think that's a really useful way to look at it. And I
Look at it like
appreciate that.
Step one,
Right, yes.
and then that's step two, the finer
Okay.
details.
Okay, so the other thing I'm concerned about, and maybe this is the exact same answer, wouldn't that be good? Okay, and that goes back to Newtown zoning, because, again, these activity centers are, 5 of them are situated within District 4. And I'm wondering how transformation of those areas will retain the setbacks, the berms, what mature tree canopy is there right now, and any of the other aspects of Newtown zoning that makes Newtown zoning a special place for Columbia to live, or Columbia a special place to live in.
Yeah, so, and I think we recognized that Columbia is special, and that's one of the reasons why Columbia, or Newtown, got special attention in the general plan, and we have the focus area in Appendix C. And the whole goal of those workshops we did with the Columbia community and the focus area illustrative drawings was to articulate those concepts, those design principles that the community cherished, and try to memorialize them to provide that direction for the zoning code changes to come.
So the activity centers then would have to follow along with whatever the Newtown zoning is dictated to be in the zoning code.
Correct. The ones in, well, right, however Newtown ultimately gets, however the zoning winds up occurring for Newtown, which we don't know yet. It's, as we all know, Newtown is a very unique floating zone. And so how that, the FDPs get, how all of that works out will have to be a very challenging component of the comprehensive rezoning.
Okay.
It might be good if we all take a 5-minute bathroom break, then come back for a final question, and then shift to the fiscal analysis, since we need to make sure we have time for both. All right, we'll be back in 5.
Thank you.